Hey, you guys, it's March 9th. If you're in Colorado, it's a snowy, cold day. I hope you're someplace where it's warm and not snowy and cold. Dr. Brian Dixon is with us today for our Points on Product call. He just came from a very warm and sunny place, but he's back in the land of Utah, and I'm understanding that there's some snow and cold over there as well. But it's our honor and privilege to have Dr. Dixon with us today. Dr. Dixon is a renowned research scientist and product developer in the space of nutrition. He's going to be talking to us today about something that's really cool, one of our newest products here, IC Brite. And with that, sir, I'll turn it over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Greg. And I have to say, it's wonderful to be with everybody again. We kind of broke the pattern there, but I'm super thankful to Christina for filling in on Omega Plus. She's just too smart for her own good. And you couldn't have learned from anybody better there. But yeah, just back from the Philippines, kind of really kicking off their market launch. And there's a lot of exciting things going on over there. So excited to see what they do, and just, love the Filipino people. I don't know that I got to experience any of that really warm weather going from airport to hotel room to office, but next time I'm going to take a few more days to get some more R&R in. But yeah, today, like Greg said, we're going to be talking about IC Brite. So IC Brite, one of our newest products, LiveVantage, just one of my absolute favorites, and it's turning out to be an incredible seller. So if you haven't tried IC Brite, if you haven't considered looking after your eye health, this will be my 30 minutes or so to try to convince you otherwise. So let's start back at the basics, and it all starts with what we call the electromagnetic spectrum. That's just the scientific way to say this is all of the radiation that exists not just on Earth, but in our entire universe. And you can see you go from things like radio waves, microwaves are down in that range as well, up into the infrared, ultraviolet, and then X-rays and gamma rays. And then just one tiny sliver of that electromagnetic spectrum are the actual wavelengths of this radiation that we can visualize. And as you'd probably guess, we called it the visible spectrum. And just to put things in a little bit of context, right, we've got infrared there. Why do you think we call it infrared? Because those are where the red spectrums lie. Or why do we call it ultraviolet? Because those are where kind of the more blues and purple colors live. And I think we've all seen that visible spectrum, right? When we maybe shine light through a prism, or effectively doing the same thing here with a rainbow. So as that sunlight is hitting the raindrops, that water is dispersing that radiation into the visible components of that visible spectrum that we can actually visualize. And just for fun, let's have a look here, right? Red on top, blue on the bottom. Has anybody ever seen a double rainbow? Right? They're pretty spectacular, but how closely have you looked? So here, red on top, blue on the bottom. If we look at the second rainbow, have you ever noticed that the colors are completely inverted? So I'm going to give you guys a little bit of homework, and I want you to let me know why that happens. It's a cool little scientific principle that's happening. All right, so let's look at kind of the anatomy of the eye. In my mind, I like to think of the eye as like being a passive projector and movie screen. So the projector is like that front part of our eyes, right? Where a lot of the lenses are, our cornea is. So our eye lets light in, and then it shines it on the movie screen at the back of our eye. Okay, so as that light is hitting the back of the eye, it's actually hitting photoreceptors. So receptors that can sense that they're being hit by light. And when those receptors get activated, it turns that light signal into an electrochemical signal that goes shooting down the optic nerve and goes all the way to the back of our brains where our visual cortex is. And yes, it is true that the image on the back of our eye is really inverted. The inverted image goes down the optic nerve, and it's actually the visual cortex of our brain that right sides up that image. So basically, it takes all the structures of your eye, it takes nerve function, especially that optic nerve, and it takes brain function to actually be able to do what we call see the world around us. But if we come back to this electromagnetic spectrum, there's an interesting situation that the eye has to balance out. So as we move from right to left on this electromagnetic spectrum, the energy from that radiation gets increasingly stronger and stronger, right? Radio waves, microwaves are considered to be generally less harmful than things like X-rays and gamma rays. And think about it, we utilize X-rays in medicine to be able to visualize the hard components of our bodies. So we can shine X-rays onto a part of our body, and it has enough energy to be able to penetrate our soft tissues so that we can see those harder structures inside of us. You can't do that with other wavelengths of light. Gamma rays are also quite interesting. Astronomers, they love to look out into space, and it's been hypothesized that the further you can see out into space, the closer you can see to the beginning of time. And one way astronomers are looking to that edge of the universe is by utilizing things like gamma ray telescopes, so they can pick up those rays traveling those vast distances through space. And the reason they have to do that with gamma rays and sometimes even X-rays, that's the radiation that has enough energy to cover those vast distances of space. So right to left, we get more energetic, but if we zoom in on that visible spectrum again, that same phenomenon is occurring. That red or orange light is considered to be a lot less energetic than the light that's up in the blue and purple zones of that visible spectrum. And I think I can give a pretty good analogy as long as you've spent some time in the water. But to illustrate that effect, think about any time you might have been swimming in the ocean, maybe you're swimming over some coral, and especially when that coral is shallow, right, the colors really pop and they're vibrant. And as you start to go down, the coral, even though it's technically the same colors, if you would have brought them up, they appear to become more and more dull. In fact, if you're a scuba diver and you've been able to dive deep in the water, or maybe you've seen a submarine movie or some other movie around scuba diving, you notice that everything turns blue or some shade of a brown. You lose those vibrant colors. And the reason for that is it's only the blue light that has enough energy to be able to penetrate that water column. So that the reds, the yellows, the oranges, those get filtered out by the water. So the eye has to balance that, and it has this interesting tightrope act that it has to conduct. And that tightrope act is that it needs to let enough light into our eye so that we can see the world around us, but not too much light where you can actually have some negative effects occurring from that. So that's why our eyes are constantly dilating and relaxing, constricting, just to help regulate the amount of energy that's coming through the eye. And the reason this is so important, I can give you a really extreme example, and I don't know if anybody's ever experienced, we call it snow blindness here in the West, but it can also occur if you're out on the water. But if you're out in an environment where light can be reflected off of something, so the water or the snow, you're effectively getting double the amount of radiation into the eye that you should, and you can actually sunburn the back of your eyes, and it's called sun blindness. And it's a temporary solution, or it's a temporary situation that will eventually remedy itself, just like when we get a little sunburn on our skin. Eventually we bounce back, but can be quite uncomfortable initially. So we want to avoid that from occurring, of course, on that large scale, but we also want to stop that from occurring on a smaller scale. And the reason for that is this light or radiation, and especially blue light, causes a pretty unique type of oxidative stress that's called photooxidation. So we've got to get that photooxidation under wraps. If we don't, it can lead to a longer term, full-blown oxidative stress. If that's not gotten under check, it can initiate an immune response, And it's this kind of vicious cycle that's been hypothesized to be part of that normal eye aging process. So we want to break the chain of that photooxidation and everything that can occur. The good news is the eye is not unarmed. It has a massive antioxidant response to try to help itself break this chain, right? This vicious cycle of oxidative stress. It has an incredibly robust NRF2 response. So all the things we talk about around protandem NRF1 synergizer apply to the eye as well. But then the eye uses a symphony of other antioxidants so that it can really get its antioxidant defenses and response in order to help also break the chain. So things like dietary antioxidants, things like vitamin C, vitamin E, very rich in the eye. But then it also utilizes some specific phytonutrients to also give itself the upper hand. So those phytonutrients are illustrated here, and specifically in what's known as the macula at the back of the eye. The macula is interesting because it's the part of the eye where the light is shown most intensely. So if we take a side view or a slice through that macula, what we'll see is this yellow pigment. And that pigment is called the macular pigment. And it turns out to be really interesting in what it's doing. It turns out it's the molecular structures of these two pigments that actually will absorb some of that, especially blue light radiation, and diffuse it out through the molecule. So it impacts the macula much less intensely than it would if we didn't have that macular pigment in the eye. So what is that macular pigment specifically? Well, it turns out they're carotenoids, and of about the 700 different carotenoids that are found in nature, the eye specifically chooses to only deposit 2 of them. And those 2 are called lutein and zeaxanthin. So it's those 2 compounds that are making up the majority of that yellow pigment inside of our eyes. And in case you guys want to go do any research on your own, it's known as macular pigment optical density, or MPOD. But basically what we want to do is get that macular pigment, or the density of it, to be as thick as possible, so that we're like wearing the best sunglasses we can on the inside of our eyes. Now, what is so interesting is this isn't just a problem with being outside in the sun, on the water, on the snow, wherever it might be. We've literally, in our modern societies, turned this into a 24-hour-a-day, 7-day-a-week problem, right? And that's all the lights and the different screens that we're in front of, literally almost all day, every day. I mean, how many of us are guilty of doing this, right? I'm checking emails last thing before I go to bed, make sure I'm not missing something over in Asia. I'm up first thing in the morning, checking emails, making sure I didn't miss something going on over in Europe. So we are constantly on our phones, right? Social media, maybe we're watching a movie in bed. Whatever it is, we're bombarding ourselves with all of this light, and it has consequences. So look at some of these statistics, and I threw this slide kind of back in because I want to illustrate the point about what a large, massive market this is, okay? So currently, it's been shown that adults are spending more than 13 hours a day in front of some sort of screen, a computer screen at work, social media on our free time, watching movies, TV, whatever it might be, 13 hours a day. 88%, or about 9 out of 10 people, feel that sight is their most valued sense. And if you think about it, it's really our vision is the primary way we are interacting with the world around us. The eye health market has grown substantially in the last few years. And a lot of that was driven by work from home and gaming. It turns out a lot of people turned to computer gaming and online gaming to be able to connect with friends and kind of work in their social networks. And you've probably heard me say this before, but these days, the consumer base is so much more educated than they were just a few years ago. And that cognition that people were in front of the screens and that they needed to do something, whether it was wearing blue blocker type sunglasses or maybe think about their eye health a little bit more, was really driven by these trends through 2020 and 2021. But here's where that information gets even better, because an eye health product only used to be considered kind of an old people's product. A lot of us didn't start thinking about our eye health until somewhere in our 40s, when, you know, all of us at some point will need to wear reading glasses. You start to see your vision decline a little bit, especially up close. You think, oh my gosh, I need to start looking after my eyes. And that was the major impetus for people to go and start to, say, purchase an eye health supplement or get some reading glasses with that blue blocker activity in it. So this is literally a market that affects everybody from 18 to, I would say, almost dead. So this is a massive market space with massive opportunities. And so taking all of this into account, right, us being hyper-focused on oxidative stress and keeping that in check, and then realizing there were some really cool nutrients that we could leverage to further build upon that NRF2 and oxidative stress base. And that was really what led us to develop IC Brite, right? It's what we're calling our new eye and brain health product, designed to shield against that blue light, support your vision, and to ultimately help your vision stay sharp. So what are some of the ingredients that are in IC Brite, and what are they doing to help support our overall vision? So the first are going to be those phytonutrients, the lutein and zeaxanthin. And very important to point out here, there are a lot of studies in the scientific literature centered around lutein and zeaxanthin and eye health. So it's important to note that we have the actual clinical dosages that have been used in that study in IC Brite. I call this slide kind of my good news, bad news slide, but this was a human clinical study that was conducted to see, you know, what is the carotenoid status in somebody, and then can you actually improve it? So here what they did for the first 6 weeks was put them on a carotenoid depleted diet. So you can see those levels are all trending down. So we lose those levels, and we lose them relatively quickly. Then for 8 weeks, they put them on a carotenoid rich diet, and you can see that literally everybody's levels increased, right? So very easy to increase our carotenoid levels, especially if we're eating carotenoid rich foods. But I also know the scientific literature, I would guess 99% of us are eating nowhere close to the fruits and vegetables that we should be consuming all day, every day, that especially contain these two carotenoids. That's the good news. We can easily increase levels. But the bad news portion of this slide is, as soon as you stop eating those carotenoid rich foods, look how your levels come down almost literally as quickly as they went up. And that's because those carotenoids are doing their job inside of our bodies, right? In our eye, they're absorbing that radiation from the sun or the lights, and they're being consumed. So as they're being consumed, we have to put them back, okay? So this is a product you need to be on, and you literally need to be on the rest of your life, or your carotenoid levels in your eye will look exactly like this. So to further support the lutein and zeaxanthin, we also have a number of vitamins and minerals in there, again, that have been shown to specifically support structures of the eye and nerve function. So we talked about that robust antioxidant response and how the eye wants as many antioxidants around as possible to help break that oxidative stress chain. So we've got 125 milligrams of vitamin C and 20 milligrams of vitamin E to support those structures of the eye. Vitamin D as well has been shown to have a lot of positive effects on the eye. A lot of the eye is made up of lipids, and especially omega-3s. So also having some that fat soluble antioxidant in vitamin E as well as vitamin D are just great further support for the eye. Copper and zinc are in there for a couple of reasons. Both copper and zinc are required for nerve function. So if you remember me talking about vision isn't just our eyes, but it's our eyes, our nerves, and our brain to be able to see the world around us. So we want to support that nerve function, but then copper and zinc are also the minerals that are required for SOD, or superoxide dismutase, to work. So if we don't have copper and zinc around, SOD isn't working, and we're not going to get as robust of an NRF2 response as we would otherwise. So to help support, again, structures of the eyes, because it is so rich in those omega-3 fatty acids, and especially DHA, we've added another 250 milligrams of those omega-3 fatty acids. And this is the exact same fish oil that's also in our Omega Plus. Now, I want to make a point. Just because there's 250 milligrams of omega-3 fatty acids here doesn't mean it's a replacement for Omega Plus. This is meant to be used in conjunction with Omega Plus, not as a replacement, because the scientific literature shows that, literally to a point of reason, it's hard to get too many omega-3 fatty acids. And then another phytonutrient we have in there, 50 milligrams of bilberry. I think I've shared kind of the interesting anecdote around what was happening with especially the early pilots and around the war effort out in Europe and the Pacific. But a lot of early pilots would put copious amounts of bilberry jam on their toast because they believed it helped them see better, especially at night, excuse me. It comes in these kind of beautiful red soft gels. Again, this is the exact same capsule that Omega Plus utilizes. We did put some caramel color in there, just so that we'd be able to differentiate Omega Plus from IC Brite. So what are some of the benefits and claims? And, because there's such solid science behind the formulation of this product, it turns out we can make a number of just wonderful claims around IC Brite. So specifically for that eye and blue light protection, we can say it's going to support our long-term eye health. And that's, remember, by breaking that chain of that photo and oxidative stress. Protecting your eyes against that oxidative stress helps increase macular pigment optical density. So how thick and dense that those carotenoids are in the macula of the eye. And by doing that, we can promote macular health and the retinal health. It's going to help protect the eyes from the effects of that blue light, both from the sun and our digital devices. And then because we're getting some of that protection in there, it's also going to help reduce eye fatigue and eye strain. I mean, how many of you have been staring at your computer screen, say, for maybe a couple of hours, and then maybe you kind of snap out of it and look around and everything looks just a little bit fuzzy? That's kind of the eye fatigue that we're talking about. In terms of vision specifically, it's going to support visual function and performance. We'll talk a little bit more about that in just a second. But visual acuity in low light or hazy conditions. So I think we all know as it turns dusk on us, it can be a little bit harder to see, especially when you're driving. That transition in light for our eyes is actually very hard to manage. Contrast sensitivity. So it's being able to better pick up an object against some background. So you're able to more clearly pick out things that you're looking at. And then tolerance and recovery from bright lights. Okay, so think again, maybe about driving. Maybe someone has their brights on, and you know how you kind of go temporarily blind from that light. The reason for that is you have saturated all of those photoreceptors, so they need time to actually reset. And so resetting those receptors to receive those wavelengths of light is critical. And it's been shown that that process can happen more quickly with the ingredients that are in IC Brite. We can also make some brain health claims. So again, remember, it takes eyes, nerves, and brain to be able to see. So those omega-3 fatty acids, some of those nutrients are going to support brain health. Look at this one, supports visual processing speed. Right, so think about a computer and how quickly it has to manage data, analyze data, and then maybe it gives you an answer. Well, our visual systems are working the same way. There's a lot of data to process for that brain to be able to actually see the image around it. That's called that processing speed. These ingredients have been shown to make that processing speed more faster. How's that for great English? To be faster. So literally, you can think faster and see faster with IC Brite. It's interesting, between these vision claims and these brain health claims, there's also some interesting research that's out there on actually improving reaction times. So we're seeing things more crisply, we're processing the information more quickly, and supporting all the structures in that visual system. As a result of all of that, reaction times have gone up. So they've seen reaction times in computer gaming situations, and then some also really interesting studies that have been done on baseball players showing faster reaction times and ultimately better statistics around baseball. Interestingly, we can also make cardiovascular health claims. So now we're getting into maybe some secondary claims, but those things that are good for our eyes, it turns out, are also great for our cardiovascular system, and really improving many aspects of our cardiovascular system. And then again, because we're filtering out at least some of that blue light that's coming into our eyes, and especially if we're guilty of being on our screens later at night, we can also talk about supporting those healthy sleep patterns, because it's the light hitting the eye that turns melatonin off. And when light stops hitting the eye, melatonin production ramps up. That's what makes us sleepy and then ultimately fall asleep. So that's really just a quick background, or quick, not so quick background of IC Brite. That's probably way more information than you cared to learn about. But again, just an absolutely wonderful product that we just couldn't be happier with. I didn't actually put the right slide there next, but also want to encourage you all to think about that eye health essential stack that we have as well. So if you're thinking about your vision, you want to support it optimally, utilize that eye health essential stack that's going to have IC Brite, Omega Plus, and Protandim NRF2 Synergizer in it. So with that, Greg, I'll hand it back over to you.